William Bowman, in his book on out-of-body experience, described also a high-energy vibratory state with cool sensations at the onset of the separation between body and soul. However, the progression of the experiment will diverge, as in Bowman's case, only the semedo, or axionic clone, of the individual leaves the body, while in Some's case, the whole tripartite man, Soma, semedo, and selido, will be translated into another dimension or wave function. The opening of the vortex was manifested by the appearance of a green media, a gelatin-like substance under the stretched buffalo skin. This progressed to the manifestation of a cone-shaped vortex of green light spinning like a tornado under the animal skin. The intensity of the light kept increasing soon it changed from a green hue to a violet one. The top of the vortex was circular, about 1 meter in diameter. At that point, the high priest elder announced that the gate of the wormhole was opened. That was the equivalent of the event horizon in a galactic black hole. Anything that penetrates into that gate will be subjected to the equivalence of mass and energy and become invisible through a shifting of the alternation diagram from mass to wave function for a prolonged period of time. This is pure and simple dematerialization. A stone thrown inside the hole produced a flaming noise as the transmutation took place. In Project Rainbow, the crew of the destroyer was subjected to a deafening noise at the outset of their transmutation. In the Dagara initiation, the first candidate who jumped into the wormhole passed right through the buffalo skin and disappeared into the vortex. His body turned to violet before he vanished, and the dematerialization was accompanied by a thunderous rumbling and an otherworldly human scream. When Some's turn came to make the ultimate quantum leap into the tunnel of naked singularities, he felt weightless as he dashed forward. He was already primed by the surrounding anti-gravity created by the supergravity of the vortex event horizon. The tornado-like wormhole was attracting him in its chasm, and its circle of light was rushing closer and closer, as if it were the gate going toward him instead of him going toward it. Soon he was engulfed in a whirling of light. He jumped high above the gateway and dived in. The icy cold temperature of the nuclear reaction in the cool seized him, and he was hurled into a chasm at a vertiginous speed, the speed of light. It was like going into an infernal roller coaster, and Some could not open his eyes. But he was warned beforehand by the high priest that his survival depends upon his ability to open his eyes in order to see and grab a ray of light that works like a rescue cable. When he did, the descent into the bottomless pit came to a halt. He was still at the level of a rotating black hole type of dimension. Come on. Type of dimension. Going further down would have thrown him into a non-rotating level, a one-way trip to oblivion, into a world of no return. When he opened his eyes, he was bedazzled by a world of lights, an aurora borealis expanding like the universe out of the Big Bang. The rays of light were exhibiting a rainbow of changing colors. This was like a neo-vitalist experience, where the primal master force and all the energies evolving from it were life, motion, and psychism. Like the Elridge crew, he had close encounters with entities of that alternate universe. He was aware of motion, activities around him, as if other consciousness or intelligences were moving about undisturbed by his presence. He came across a huge face with countless eyes that reminds us of the flying archangels in Ezekiel's vision of the shore of the river Kibar. He also heard laughter, breathing, and humming complaints, surveying the dimension in his dematerialized body. He was startled to see that the chasm below his location was a terrifying and violent volcano, a bottomless pit, a world without end. One of the eerie characteristics of this bottomless pit was the permanent alternance of opening and closing. The initiate was not allowed to penetrate into that other dimension because at that level, the Cinderella principle, or in the Poincaré return, does not play. The ray of light held in his hand was the rescue rope for the return to the ordinary reality. He was in a rotating platform of a Roger Penrose wormhole. Below were the forbidden zones of Einstein-Rosen bridges. His experience reminds us of the heaven of St. Paul, the hierarchy of dominoes and principalities, the heaven of John in the Apocalypse, and the vision of Ezekiel. A striking resemblance can be observed between Somme's pyramid-like structure and the mountain of the cherub Lucifer before his fall. Nothing was more beautiful in the eyes of the shaman than this living pyramid crowned with gold and sapphires and other precious stones or metals. In Ezekiel 28:14 we read, "With the cherub I place you. You were on the holy mountain of God, walking among the fiery stones." Also, the doors and the foundations of the heavenly Jerusalem were sparkling with diamonds and sapphires, jasper, chalcedony, emerald, sardonyx, carnelian, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, hyacinth, amethyst, and pearls. Revelations 2:19-21. The pyramid of the shaman was exerting a powerful attraction, and it was emitting an enticing and sweet symphony. The initiate was overwhelmed with emotions. To bring Somme back into our ordinary material state, the officiating elders began to pull on the edges of the buffalo skin while performing a tossing motion. The violent light of the vortex stretched higher, upward through the magic skin, and detached itself, flying through the air about 10 meters. Somme came out like a detached blob of violet light that landed on the ground with a noise. He progressively regained his normal appearance as the violet color passed to green and then to dark. For a while, parts of his body carried tongues of violent fire that he hurried to remove because now the fire was causing burns. Somme had resulting scars from those scattered burns. On regaining his normalcy, the initiate had to go into a period of readjustment to normal gravity. Like the astronaut or cosmonaut coming back from a long stay in space, the initiate, after his release from the interdimensional tunnel of anti-gravity or supergravity, must learn how to walk in an ordinary gravity environment like ours. He had to think about each leg before he could lift it and put it down on the ground. Dr. Somme was one of the lucky initiates that made a safe return to our ordinary reality. 3 of his 65 companions did not make it. There is always the danger of death in traveling through the wormholes of parallel universes. The parents and relatives of those young men knew that, and this was the reason why they mourned and cried at the moment of their departure for the initiation camp. The first initiate who died did so after his ejection from the vortex. The violet ball of fire rolled onto itself with a roaring sound before releasing the young man into the ordinary state. But he never regained normalcy as his body remained lying in a pool of greenish slippery plasma. Parts of his body looked slashed while other parts appeared burned. He died in great distress. Later on, the pool of plasma coagulated and became hard. The next day, what remained of him was cleaned by scavenger worms. The fate of this boy, although predictable, was not as ominous as that of another initiate who never came back out of the infernal vortex. The elders frantically pulled on the buffalo skin to toss out the boy, but nothing happened. This was a one-way trip into oblivion. Probably he could not open his eyes to grab a ray of light, the rescue rope, and he ended into the non-rotating realm of Einstein-Rosen bridge and was lost forever into the bottomless pit. He was trapped forever in the cracks between the world. The tragedy of that situation is the fact that in that crack, one never dies, but one also never lives. This reminds us of the bottomless pit or the hell of John's apocalypse. The naked singularities of the Zandoric universe are pluriform in their manifestation. Non-initiates like us don't have access to details, except some gross generalizations. Even after initiation as a Hunsi Kanzo, Claude Planson could not get a formal introduction to another form of singularity called underwater initiation, even from his wife. He could not get a formal introduction, even from his wife, the Mambo Matilda, who had been initiated in that matter. This is not surprising when one considers the queer characterizations of the rotating or non-rotating black hole-like phenomenon involved. When caught in the trance by the axionic Vodun, the young lady or any adept is catapulted into the wormholes and disappears from the world of ordinary reality to reappear in the parallel universe of the Loa, in their underwater habitat, where she will live as a servant or slave for a certain length of time that varies from days to years. The question that comes to our mind is the following: how can a person breathe for hours underwater? Is he or she transformed into a fish or other aquatic animal? This is a possibility when one considers all the options in the coherent superposition of their wave function status. Any metamorphosis is possible. However, on passing from visible matter to invisible matter, the person is in a non-organic state and does not require respiration or nutrition in our ordinary way. He or she is not subjected to the rules of physiology of the material world. The adept has assumed an immaterial existence, although he is still subjected to the law of entropy. As axion or wave function, he can be degraded to any form of energies or forces, including pure inertial energy or potential energy. He can return to a more active status by the actions of a super being or by human rituals. We can theorize that during the underwater initiation, the adept is translated into a dark matter entity or is possessed in a permanent way by a dark matter or shadow matter Vodun that confers invulnerability to the person by taking over the functioning of every particle, atom, and molecule of his body, protecting him or shielding him against drowning, burning, wounding, and the like, making him visible or invisible, teletransporting him from place to place, and at times making him ubiquitous. Furthermore, it is said that underwater sojourns do not mean living literally in water. That refers to an abode of a different dimension and located way below the water or parallel to the water. It can be a shadow matter city, village, or world that coexists with the elements of water or our ordinary world without disturbing it except on specific occasions, circumstances, or purposes. It is made of that dark matter that penetrates our molecules, atoms, and particles without disrupting their architectures or structures. It is a shadow world that can be anywhere under the surface of the globe. In some other cultures, those shadow cities are said to be inhabited by elves, satyrs, mannequins, contombili, and the like. And some are located inside or below mountains, lakes, rivers, oceans, or even in the air, such as Magonia of the medieval European period. In Degara land, Burkina Faso, a sojourn in the underwater parallel universe is part of the initiation. In a hidden canyon is a stream of water 2 or 3 feet wide that overlays the doorway of the ancestors' abode. This water is considered the roof of the Chonian world in that part of the globe. There is no bottom in it in an ordinary sense, but instead there is a world. When thrown into the pool, the initiate found himself floating in an outer space-like environment. There is no water around him. Furthermore, he is transformed into wave function and felt like a shapeless consciousness. Like the crew members of the Elridge destroyer in 1943, He interacts with a misty presence, shadowy matter entities manifested as foggy, smoky, luminous, or dark clouds. Some have the shape of a human being, and others appear as two-dimensional cutout or unspecifiable shapes. In taking into consideration the tripartite nature of the human being, semedo, celido, or corps cadavre, we can see in the composite state with the Vodun that the quantum transformations will affect primarily the corps cadavre and its IPN. The semedon or axionic clone of the individual coalesces with the Vodun as the latter takes over all control and cooperates in the transformation of the visible body into invisible body. During the sojourn underwater in the parallel universe of the spirits, the adept will be instructed into the secrets and rituals of the alternate reality and its religion. The return to normalcy follows the bidirectional arrow of the equations or cascade of equations. The semedo reestablishes all coding in the visible matter. The newly acquired knowledge and powers are also encoded in the tripartite person. In the case of Matilda, the gift of seer, or la prise des yeux, prends yeux, was said not to be given to her during her sojourn in the underwater abode of the gods. She had obtained it through a higher initiation performed in the Plain du Cul-de-Sac by a Hougan named Papa Grosse Roche. In that state of trance, she is living the unbroken wholeness of space-time. She sees the present, the past, and the future, and the interconnection of things in the world. That trance is very taxing for her, as she usually comes out of it very exhausted. She is not the experience of Dr. Jacques Ravi in his journal Errance et Certitude. The crisis of possession was a psychedelic experience for him, and that was followed by a state of well-being. When overwhelmed by that magnetic field, he experienced the sensation of being lifted up above the ground. His feet were not in contact with the floor. Also, an unknown sensation was moving along his spinal cord up to his brain, enhancing his capability of utilizing the 90% unused dimensions of the cerebral cortex. Wow. Also, an unknown sensation was moving along his spinal cord up to his brain, enhancing his capability of utilizing the 90% unused dimensions of the cerebral cortex. He also experienced the impressions of being multiple. Another personality had coalesced with his personality and was using his brain and his senses. He was looking at a woman sitting nearby through the eyes of the invaded entity. His own vision was being filtered through the vision of someone else. In that state of transcendence, he became a seer with an instantaneous knowledge of everything in the present, the past, and the future. He had achieved omniscience. However, this was for a short time. The Cinderella principle, that is the conservation laws of nature, brought him back to our three-dimensional ordinary reality. An adept can enter the world of the Zandoric singularities through an Einstein-Rosen bridge to end up in a land of no return, going forever into the realm of the Vauduns in places such as Nanguinea, Guinea or Africa, or Ville-au-Camp, in northern Haiti. The underwater abodes are similar to these places, except the adept is staking there for a limited period of time and will be returned to the land of the living on schedule. In many places in Haiti, one can hear the story of a very old grandparent or relative who has decided one day to get up and go to Nanguinea, the land of their ancestors and the Vauduns. At first, people around the adept do not pay heed to the twaddle of a senile or near-senile individual. But when they realize that person is no place to be found, they suddenly acknowledge the importance of the warning or announcement of departure. The singular event usually begins with the adept retreating into seclusion behind the house, seated comfortably on a short-legged chair and singing. The chant or song is an important part of that ritual. The person can sing for many hours. During that time, the people in the surroundings become used to the litany and even ignore the eccentricity. When suddenly they come to notice the silence of the old person, they venture behind the house to see what is happening. It is then that they discover the absence or disappearance of the adept. They call on each other to search for the old citizen. Normally the search is fruitless. The adept either disappears by spontaneous combustion or by translation into shadow matter to enter the parallel world of no return. Karen McCarthy Brown tells the story of Joseph bin Morvan in like manner in her book Mama Lola. His wife discontinued the search after Morvan appeared to her in a dream to tell her that he was happily living in the land of his ancestors, the Guinea. The abduction into that non-rotating type of singularity, or rather universe, creates denizens of an intermediate nature between us and the shadow matter world. The abduction into that non-rotating type of singularity, or rather universe, creates denizens of an intermediate nature between us and the shadow matter world. The symbiotic alliance may give rise to creatures like Baka, zombie, elves, fairies, and mannequins. They come in different sizes and shapes and come to crave nostalgically of the existence of our ordinary reality. But they have their boundary constraints and can manifest themselves into our world only for a short period. Some of them do not like our modern technological environment. Most prefer the rustic and idyllic countryside. They prefer peasantry to city dwellers. It is possible that our electronic wizardry interferes with the wizardry of some species in that alternate reality. Some of them appear as permanent hybrids between animals and axionic entities, or between animal, human being, and vaudoons, or human beings, plants, and vaudoons, or simply human beings and Loa. We have to remember that many of the Loa like to be married to humans. In Haiti, the contract of marriage is produced in the format of an ordinary matrimony. What appears as an imitation of a three-dimensional event may have profound actualization in the world of naked singularities. That can give rise to creatures similar to the Nephilim of Genesis. We do not know all the laws or principles governing the axionic singular world of vaudoons and similar entities like we do not yet know of all the laws of our ordinary reality. In the 20th century, we have made great strides with quantum mechanics and its implications. Still, many more secrets of nature remain to be discovered. There exists great complexity in either universe. In the composite state of adorcism, the Loa present themselves with some fixed characteristics. Agasu is a panther-like creature, and the voodoo mask reproduces that aspect. Dambala is a snake-like creature. Velekeke is a rigid dead body. Legba is a handicapped, deformed old man in Haiti. He is more of an Apollon-type deity in West Africa or in Dahomey. It seems that the psychionic force of adepts or voodooists imposed a mental construct on the axionic entities. This can create confusion for the psychology researchers who want to see the crisis of possession as unlikely, as uniquely a manifestation of power, of the power of suggestion, until he is caught up personally in the whirlwind of that magnetic field and tries to resist the invasion without success. Then he will be illuminated. He will become an eyewitness or body and soul witness like Maya Deren and Dr. Jack Ravi. Quantum field theory has opened for us vistas of unknown compartments or branches in our universe and has allowed us to go through the ambiguity barrier. We have discovered unlimited power in us, and we have begun to talk in a megalomaniac way. Nothing seems to be impossible to us anymore, and soon we may enter into a new age where we will be able to use the remaining 90% of our brain capacity, or to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Some already envisage an ageless body and timeless mind. Some predict the end of entropy or decay. Some have dismissed the existence of matter, as all physical events are fractal manifestations of the unbroken wholeness or universal mind, when the Feynman diagram shows us the permanence of alternation, or the principle of duality at work at every instant in our universe. Some have reached the dead end of solipsism, which is the equivalent of being born without a father or a mother. They would be like Yahweh. That position would not be a dead end if the proponent would seek communion with Yahweh, to enter into his dimension and become one with the Alpha and Omega of all things. Then he would discover that his solipsism is just a fractal expression of the Eternal One. In his ordinary station in life, he cannot wish the world away into oblivion as long as immanent eternal is one. As long as the immanent eternal one is continuously thinking the world into existence. Nevertheless, we still have psychic power to mold reality around us, and even to impose a mental construct to the shadow entities when we enter into composite state with them. Nevertheless, we still have psychic power to mold reality around us, and even to impose a mental construct to the shadow entities when we enter into composite state with them. Through specific initiation, the Vodouist can interact with the Janus-type nature of the Loa Vodouns. In the Nago rituals, he uses the benevolent side of the Loa. In the Bakongo rituals, he uses the nefarious characteristics of the Petrozandor Vodouns. Are there boundary constraints to the actions and power of the Vodouns and other entities of the visible world? We have already seen that the psychic force of the adept can mold, to some extent, the reality of the Vodun, such as Legba features in Africa and in Haiti. We have also noticed the quasi-total absence of Vodou in the culture of African Americans in the United States. The alternate reality of the African Haitian or African Caribbean does not prevail amongst Black Americans, although the latter share beliefs in fairies, elves, leprechauns, satyrs, fauns, lutins, and Robin Goodfellows with their white and European counterparts. Also, the preponderance of science and modern technology has diminished the manifestations of elves in Europe and North America. However, the cinematographic world continues to keep alive the belief in vampire, lycanthrope, poltergeist, leprechaun, and the like. Those movies are bringing a windfall profit to their creators at the box office. However, the psychic power of the 20th century mind has imposed itself to the manifestation of the shadow entities. And when they do interfere with our ordinary reality, we prefer to think that they are coming from a far distant, far advanced civilization in outer space, when in fact, they are denizens of local parallel universes. Science fiction is nothing more than a modern version of the old fairy tales. The creation of SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is tangible proof that the scientifically minded 20th century man is as gullible as the medieval man in believing and searching the extraordinary. However, that faith in a far advanced civilization in outer space, like that in fairies and lutins of Brittany, is not a pure production of our imagination. That faith has come about following encounters with alternate realities that do exist. And in the case of Haiti, that reality can be experienced every day with a scientific regularity within the confines of the Humfo or Vodou temple. The superposition state of the crisis of possession or adorcism can be observed every day by researchers who can bring their modern equipment such as galvanometer, Geiger counter, magnetometer, camera, and the like. Once again, I have to recommend the Vodou initiation to the researchers who can experience firsthand a Vodou possession like Maya Deren. And will not talk nonsense, such as imaginal phenomena. Modern gadgetry will allow scientists the opportunity to measure the changes in the environment produced by the high energy vibratory state and its cascade of equations that can give rise to electromagnetic radiation, nuclear radiation, supergravity state, infrared radiation, heat waves, or very low temperatures. In our times, the modern physical equipment that can reveal the presence of interaction of shadow matter entities comprises also EMF meters, electromagnetic field recorder, thermal imaging cameras, color thermal images, night vision devices, and rapid reading electronic thermometer. The tricorder Mark I combines detection of EMF radiation, temperature, air pressure, and light changes. This will reveal to researchers the potential for destruction inherent in the presence of the entities, and that interaction with them is not always of a benign nature. They do not usually come in peace. They are not such good neighbors, or the gentry they claim to be. Most of them, if not all of them, would do as they wish if there were no boundary constraints imposed on them. The Mambo, or the Hugan, carries a magic wand, the Asson, to control those forces and to harness them for specific purposes like harnessing electricity, electronics, atomic power, nuclear power, and magnetism. The adepts must remember all the time that the Vodouns are searching their own satisfaction in their alliance with human beings. And they are more bent towards dictatorship and servitude in using men and women to fulfill their desire.